Welcome, Melissa. Tell us what this video is about.
Hi Barbara. So in this video I want to share our experience of working with a community of practice to collaborate on a knowledge product. The tool we created is a learning tool and it's a training tool as well, so I thought it would be relevant as a case study for the ATVET project. The community of practice I'm talking about is for early childhood development, what we call ECD, concerned with preschool or kindergarten teaching, what you might call preschool or kindergarten teaching. The Bridge ECD Community of Practice is a multi-stakeholder group. It includes preschool teachers, it includes trainers and educators, funders and government representatives. The resource we produced was a tool for ECD teachers, who we call practitioners, and also for ECD teacher training providers. So in this video, I want to focus on the processes and stages of collaboration between the knowledge management team at Bridge and between the Bridge COP members that led to the development of this tool.
Great. So a COP being a community of practice.
Right.
Can you give us a bit of an idea of what was actually produced?
It's a resource called the ECD Practitioner Quality Reflection Tool, and it promotes the professional development of ECD practitioners. It's a self-reflection tool designed around a series of questions to prompt practitioners to think about their own practice and their own strengths and weaknesses in their practice. These reflection tools are linked to 4 domains: teaching and learning, ECD environment, ECD policy framework, and leadership and management. So this is what it looks like in print form. I'll just show you here. It's a file, okay, that belongs to the practitioners themselves. So they use it and it's their resource and they can write in it and they can add into it. And it's supported by a mediated guide. That's for the training practitioners, the training providers who work with the practitioners. So it's a kind of a resource for them that we produce, but then belongs to them and they can add into it. So there's also an online version, and all of these things are open education resources.
So how did it all start? Who decided that this was the kind of resource that was needed, and why was it developed collaboratively rather than by a single person or organization?
It started unintentionally. The kickoff point was a debate in the community of practice on the question, what is quality in ECD, in early childhood development schools or centers or provision? And we started talking about the different ways in which we need to think about quality in ECD. That's what led to us developing the 4 domains around teaching and learning and environment and so on. And then people felt that we needed to involve the actual practitioners, the teachers, the educators on the ground who deal with the kids directly. We needed to get their views on quality. We also started to realize that notions of quality are very context dependent, and that people working in under-resourced environments had different views and different challenges around quality to those working in well-resourced environments. So how do you get common standards? How do you get any agreement on quality across different contexts? So then we started getting the community of practice members themselves to formulate quality reflection questions so that we could get this kind of broad range of views. So we had to do it collaboratively because we wanted to reflect the different perspectives in the sector.
What did you do if people disagreed?
Well, it was always quite interesting when they disagreed, but that's really why we ended up having quality questions rather than quality statements or standards. We moved away from the idea of standards. So this approach lent itself to a kind of open-ended reflection, and we wanted practitioners, the teachers themselves, to take ownership of their own views on quality and to kind of grow their professionalism around it. And then our knowledge management role kicked in because we were the ones who obviously selected and processed the various iterations of all the questions.
So now you have lists of questions that are grouped into domains. What was next after that?
The collaborative process kicked up a notch as we decided that we actually needed to run a pilot of the approach and to get feedback from the end users. So in this case, that would have been the preschool educators themselves and their trainers. So that was the idea of the pilot. And this is where we moved away a little bit from the community of practice, and we went into partnerships with our community of practice members. And these partnerships are very useful because Bridge itself doesn't have direct contact with preschools. So we partnered with 9 training providers who were part of the community of practice. And we could never have done this pilot in 6 provinces, sending mediators to talk to educators, practitioners in 20 different types of preschools without this collaborative partnerships and without agreeing on different roles and responsibilities in the collaboration. So our partners helped us craft the pilot and the site visits and the mediation process and used their people to send to the sites.
Okay, so great collaboration. Did you do an evaluation of the pilot, and was that collaborative?
I have to say that the M&E was popped in after the pilot, which is not the right way of doing things, we know. We asked an M&E expert to help us craft a theory of change, reflecting on what the pilot aims had been and how it had evolved, and ways of analysing the feedback that we got from the mediators who went to the actual centres, to the site visits. Luckily, we had held a post-pilot reflection workshop with the school visit mediators, and we'd captured all the learnings and the knowledge that came out of this. We also took it back to the community of practice, and we got a lot of input on the pilot version of the tool from the community of practice and recommendations about how to review and adapt it.
So what was the next stage?
That was more like a knowledge product development stage, which we had to take back in and take ownership of. So the piloting had been done completely on a volunteer basis with these partners, and now we had to craft the pilot into a proper resource. So to end up getting something that looks like this, as I say, which is, it's quite a tool and a resource. We had to do it in-house, and we had to get some funding for it as well. There was graphic design involved and layout and all that kind of thing. We still continued the collaboration because we had a reference group of COP members who gave input, especially on this mediator guide from the training provider perspective. So that then we took back, and it became a knowledge management process.
So once you had the final product, this quality reflection tool file and the mediator guide that you've shown us, what then?
That's the stage we're at now. So we're collaborating once again with our pilot partners in terms of how they're using this final version of the tool with their own trainers and practitioners in the field. Some higher education institutes are also using it with their own students, which is quite interesting. Obviously, we've also shared the tool through all our communities of practice and with other forums as widely as possible.
What are some of the key lessons you've learned about collaboration from this project?
It takes a long time, I have to say. So getting input and doing the iterations was time consuming, but it turns out to be very worthwhile in terms of the richness of the content that you get. The scope of the tool also grew over time. It started off as a little kind of, 2-pager and then became this resource. So from a knowledge management point of view, there were a lot of stages when we had to take it back internally. So selections and decisions have to be made, otherwise the thing will never be finished. And the actual writing and crafting was very much an in-house activity by our own knowledge management team. So I think it's also important to recognize that there are limits to volunteerism, how much you can draw on other people who are giving their own time. So our partners gave freely of their time throughout the process, but you can't depend on volunteers to meet deadlines when they have their own full-time job priorities. You have to have someone driving the collaboration and taking responsibility for the outputs. And you need to allocate time and money to the production of this kind of resource within your own organization.
We have identified cross-cutting themes in the ATVET and ATVET for Women Knowledge Management Strategy and in this learning program. You've talked about collaboration, but do you have any final comments about innovation, quality assurance, or monitoring and evaluation in this case study?
Well, the idea of a self-reflection tool for professional development is not an innovation. I think anyone who's ever done any training uses self-reflection. But the development process through using a community of practice, I think, was quite innovative and quite different. and the fact that it was multi-stakeholder and that there was quite a long iterative process was an innovation. So we spent a lot of time in the initial stages thinking about quality from different perspectives and what it means in real life contexts, and how do we actually reflect on these issues. So I think that was the innovative part of it. In terms of quality assurance, I think this happened quite well and quite naturally, because through the community of practice we had the subject matter content experts there. They were all ECD specialists. So we had that kind of point of quality assurance to help us. And then as far as producing the final tool, by the time we got to that stage, we'd had feedback. There had been a number of eyes on it many times and lots of changes. And then the final tool itself went through our own knowledge management quality assurance processes. As far as M&E goes, I talked about M&E of the pilot, which could have been done better, but we did actually do quite a lot of sort of thinking around it afterwards. And we are now in the stage, as I said, of actually sending it out, and we now have to think about impact assessment. And that's quite difficult because it is an OER. People can use it how they want to, and there's no, sort of like determination. They're not forced to kind of report back to us, as it were. So we send out surveys to try and find out how it's being used. We've got our own analytics in terms of our website usage. And we also get feedback through our communities of practice. So they are our mechanisms to track it. And it's part of our own KM processes to capture anything that's shared at COPS. And any implementation stories or partnerships that we hear about, we try and follow up and track that. So watch this space.
Very exciting. Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks, Barbara.